I'm going to talk about Greasemonkey and a little bit more about some unusual things you can do with it. So how many people have heard of Greasemonkey before? How many people have used Greasemonkey? How many people think that it's only good for Facebook applications or doing some weird thing with Gmail or something else? So I'm hoping tonight to convince you that it is a little bit more than that. For those people not familiar with Greasemonkey, it's primarily a Firefox plugin. It's been around for about 10 years now. It was created back in November 2004. It has now spread, the support of it has spread throughout most of the browsers. The scripts themselves are written in JavaScript. They're called user scripts. There's some slight header information about it, but other than that, they are straight JavaScript. There are versions, they're available for Chrome, Opera, and several different versions of add-ons for Firefox that allow you to run these user scripts. The Chrome extensions themselves are also written in JavaScript, so some of the scripts can be adapted to that. I won't go into that much detail. It's a little bit tricky and they aren't as well supported, but if you want to get started out with doing this, using the original Greasemonkey plugin for Firefox is probably the easiest way to go. So what can you do with Greasemonkey? So if you look, userscripts.org is the main website where the repository for all of the user scripts are collected. The most popular scripts that are there are ones that do nice things like control your Farmville farms for you and automate and cheat at a number of online games. I think #1 script works with vKontakte, which is the Russian version of Facebook, basically. So that, again, kind of permeates this idea that this is sort of this toy. You make these little widgety, hacky scripts to do this stuff with. But you can do a lot more with it. So as I mentioned, the scripts themselves are JavaScript. They live on your machine, and they have access in the browser to everything that you would have access to as a person on the page that you're looking at. So you can modify everything about that page. You can modify the HTML, you can modify the CSS, and you can even modify the JavaScript that's embedded in the page itself. You have complete control over that. So you can add brand new functionality to web pages. You can actually merge two pages together. You can pull information from another source. If there is a website that you really want to get information from but doesn't have an API for it, and you want to build a quick little client for that, you can actually scrape the information off it and build like a fake API to pull that information in. You can also, if you do any type of web development for your clients and you have a lot of trouble getting them to identify or recognize what it is you're talking about as an idea you're trying to get on the website, building static mockups or pages for them maybe doesn't always do it. You can use Greasemonkey to build a wrapper around their live website, install it on their desktop in their office, and have them play with it for a few days and see these live changes on the website without having to do anything that would affect their back-end website. If you are having to monitor remote servers, maybe a server farm, Amazon cluster, you can build, using Greasemonkey, a status bar that kind of follows you around the web. So rather than having to switch back and forth between a console or a different web page to see what's going on, you could build a small applet that would go out, do the checking for you, and update a small bar across the top of your screen. So you can use that to follow you around the web. You look at CNN, on Facebook, you always have your status, whatever you're trying to keep track of there at one spot. And of course, you can build small applets into existing web pages, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. So how do you get Greasemonkey? So the easiest way to get it is to go to greasespot.com, which is sort of the homepage for Greasemonkey. That is where the documentation lives, the wiki, the blog for it. There's also links there to download it. You can also get it by just going to the add-ons menu within Firefox and search for it there. If you are trying to get one of the sort of clones, the biggest clone for Chrome, if you're a Chrome user, is one called Tampermonkey. I'll show that here in a few minutes. And it's pretty much a faithful clone of Greasemonkey. Chrome used to have a little bit better direct support of user scripts and being able to sort of copy them over as extensions. Once they set up their Play Store, they really started forcing everyone to go through that Play Store. So you have to kind of make some modifications to the browser to allow third-party script sources and some other things. So it's not quite as flexible as it used to be. You can still do that if you like. But Tampermonkey is probably the best way to go if you're a Chrome user.
Your slide says greasepipe.net.
Yes.
It is greasepipe.com. Right?
Greasebot.net, I believe.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, both of them look like they're spot.
Spot, yeah, like grease spot. Grease spot on your shirt. So,
okay, grease spot.
So
it's .net.
Yeah. So let's start off by
Okay.
Sucks this. It's hard to do upside down. All right, does anyone notice anything different about my version of the JSLou website? Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. All right, so we've got the weather on here. So as I mentioned before, if you've got clients and you're trying to impress upon them an idea that you're talking about, if I'm trying to convince you guys, hey, I've got this great idea, I want to put weather into the page, and you all just like, I can't see what the hell that's going to look like. You can build a WebMonkey script like this, or Greasemonkey script, and I'll hit reload on it here real quick so you can see what that's going to look like. And it's going to go out, and it's actually fetching the weather live. It's scraping it off of the National Weather Service page, and it's getting the live weather and inserting it back here on the page. So the Greasemonkey script is sitting as a layer on top of the page. It has access to everything that's in the page. What I did was I injected a new div into the page, attached it underneath here. I did some styling to add some rounded borders on it. Had a function that will go out, grab the weather, and inject it back into the inner HTML on that div that is inserted. So you can build this out into a much more sophisticated set of functionality in a web page. You can build sidebars, you can build all sorts of things that would live live on top of a live page. And this actually is live across all of the pages. So each one of your Greasemonkey scripts, as part of the header, is you give it targeting information to tell it what URLs you're wanting to target. And I basically said I want to target all of the JSLou pages. So it's going to follow around and it will run as soon as the page is loaded. There's no need to do any window on load, it does that for you. And as soon as the page is done loading, it starts up the script and will inject itself. Let's look at the next example here. Back over here, hold on. All right, so we're going to look at a little bit more robust application. So we talked about what can you do as sort of this little widgety thing, what can you do as a larger scale. So part of my purpose of my talk is to talk about using Greasemonkey as a larger set of applications that you can build on top of applications. So at some point, if you're working for clients or your boss, has anyone happened to come to you and ask you to do something that is impossible? So at some point, one of those people is going to come to you and say, I've got this application, I need you to make this change to it, and it's something I bought last week online, it's a cloud application, and there's no source code to it, but I want you to make a change to it. So that's sort of what happened to me, and then one of the reasons that came out with having to use Greasemonkey. So here I've got, I went and signed up for a demo account for VendHQ, which is one of the more popular point-of-sale terminal applications. If you go to a coffee shop and they're fiddling with an iPad, they're probably using this or a similar tool. So let's say hypothetically we want to do t-shirt sales and coffee sales here at the JSLou meetings. And we wanted to sort of build out our own POS system. We don't really have time or resources to do it because we want to build the website out more instead. The VendHQ works pretty much what we want, but it's missing some functionality, and we don't have source code to it. So do we write it off and go find something else and keep looking, or do we use this? So with Greasemonkey, you can expand your options that you might look at as software. Only you might write off closed source applications simply because you can't augment them. Greasemonkey gives you the ability to start adding functionality into these applications and make them
How do you get the users to use it?
What's that?
You would have to have each user individually use Greasemonkey, right?
That's correct.
But isn't this a public-facing site? Or can you do that?
Well, so this would be for a closed environment. So, for example, if you're working at a company, and you've got 50 users or even a dozen users who are using a smaller scale system where you're trying to build that functionality. So not something that's public-based. You can certainly release the script publicly. I mean, it's how, as mentioned earlier, the vContactor script has like 250 million users throughout Russia and so forth. So you can build a very wide-scale audience using these scripts. Each one has to download it, and it does run locally on their local platform. So let's hit load. All right, so we've built this out a little bit. Done some changes here. So I've skimmed the entire top here, added the JSLou logo, some identification, changed the coloring. So this particular application has no skinning available to it. So if you want to give look and feel about it, to give some ownership to it, that's what we've done here. I've also inserted this new bar, a brand new div here. That's a message bar. I'm going to show how that works here in just a second. For example, we have some volunteers that are here manning this for us at the front desk or something, and we try and give them clear instructions about how to do these sales. We're not really sure that they're listening. So we want to build some functionality that really makes sure that they follow our instructions. But the VendHQ doesn't have any of that functionality built in, so what we're going to do is add that support on our own. So we have this pop-up box here that says when you sell a t-shirt, don't forget to ask them for the size, because maybe we're selling out a cafe press and we need to manually put the order in and ship it to them. And all of the interns we keep getting can't remember to do that. So now we've got an application, we've added that in. It doesn't have that off the shelf. We have the ability to add that in. So same thing for coffee. Every time they sell coffee, we're really concerned that they might spill it, so we remember don't spill coffee on the customer. So, and the screen's a little off on this thing, but it gives you an idea of what you can do. And then finally, if after they sell a certain amount here, say we limit, we're concerned if for fraud reasons or anything of that nature, we don't want them to sell any more than $15 at a time. So here it sees, looking down here at the total div, it's able to tell that the order is above $15. It's actually, if you can see it very well, but change the color down here is red to give you some additional notification that they've exceeded what we told them to do in a sale. So these are all functionality that's not in this application that you can keep building upon. All right, so the anatomy of the Greasemonkey script that makes it different than the JavaScript primarily is just the header. There's about 15 different header fields you can put in there. These are the most common ones. If you go and create a new Greasemonkey script, when you first install Greasemonkey, it'll add the little monkey face up there in the top right-hand corner of Firefox. There's a little menu you can pull down, and one of the options is add a new script. It'll prompt you as fields for each of these common pieces of information. Name is simply the name of your script, description, namespace. If you're having two or more scripts running on the same web page, namespace keeps the variables from colliding. So you want to just give that as a unique URL, use your own domain name. Includes, these are what you're trying to target as far as your web page. So you can use wildcards, so in jslou.org/star will target all of the pages. Version is a version number. It actually has now a live updating checking. So if you have a new version of your script, you can have a new field. There's a field actually that's an additional one called update URL that it will go out and check automatically, so you can push live updates out to the scripts. A couple years ago, I did most of the work with this. there was no such thing. So I was working on developing a library to push out changes on the fly. Grant is some added security to tell the user which of the Greasemonkey functions you're going to use. So if you're going to do any XML HTTP requests, you would need to put those in there to grant it to the script. Also lets the user know that you are going to go pull some other information in case they're concerned about security. The Greasemonkey API consists of these 14 different function calls and pieces of information. Most of them pretty self-explanatory. They're sort of a simplistic way of doing it rather than dealing with that JavaScript level. The most powerful thing is the GM XML HTTP request, which does not have the cross-domain restrictions on you. You have full access to whatever the user has access to. So if you're building an application that sits on top of an intranet application, whatever the authenticated user has access to, your script has complete access to pull the information in. It's really handy if you've got an application that you're finding users switching between a dozen different screens to pull up information or custom information. You can pull that information and stick it in one page, particularly if it's something that's not on the roadmap to have those changes put in. You can, in an afternoon, build something that really helps speed up a number of processes. So some development tips. Out of the box, Greasemonkey error logging doesn't log to the console log. You have to flip some switches to do that. It gets really annoying when your script just doesn't work and you're getting no feedback at all. So you'll need to do those. When you another thing that's handy is there's the unsafe window, which is a global variable that's available that gives you sort of direct access again into the page down to the variable level in the JavaScript that's running on the page. So you can actually modify and change values in the underlying JavaScript as it's running, which is really powerful. That allows you to build some neat things. So if you want to build a client-side monitoring system, so if you've got an application that's running and the customer is always saying that it's not working correctly, and you want to monitor that from the customer perspective, you can actually monitor the div. When you see something weird, you can actually push back to a central error logging to keep an eye on stuff without having to just always rely on what you're seeing from the backend requests. Some real gotchas on doing a thing. Greasemonkey scripts can be very fragile at times because you're really dependent upon the underlying DOM and the layout and the structure of the page, which people like to change quite a bit. So you have to be very careful when you're relying upon the structured page to not try and say, I want the fourth LI item off of this third UL on the page. You should try and find things that have IDs and use and reference things with IDs because they're less likely to change and you're directly referencing those things on the page. You should also work on building a library that does some detection when the script breaks or it can't find something so that it disables itself. Otherwise you can have very unpredictable results and then also report that non-functioning back to you so you know your script has sort of fallen off the map. DOSing, creating a DOS, denial of service attack with Greasemonkey is very possible and easy to do, particularly if you're doing some sort of automated form submission. If a form changes and does something different than you're expecting, you may be doing 10,000 submissions at once. Also, it's very easy if you're pulling, say, product information or something from a particular website, you're trying to pull down their catalog or portions of their catalog, you could have accidentally pulled large sections of it once, which could do very bad things. So since you're pulling the entire web page and all the images, you have to be very careful about that. Some of the additional resources, I mentioned before, greasebot.net, userscripts.org is the main source of all of the scripts that people are putting up there in the repository, so you can go and check out some scripts and see how they work. There's a Greasemonkey Hacks book that came out about 8 or 9 years ago. It's still pretty good for a starter book. You probably pick up a cheap copy for a couple bucks here and there. It's good to check out. And with that, I don't know where any questions I have.
Can you bring in third-party libraries, like you want to use jQuery UI?
So jQuery is a little bit problematic. You get collisions with the $sign variable and deal with things. So you can there's a basically a way to get around that is these grants down here. You want to turn on any of those grants. So if you just put a grant in there, what that does is it sort of puts Greasemonkey back into a reverted sandbox mode that allows you to have a separate environment space for that variable. Otherwise, you're going to have problems in using jQuery. That's probably the biggest issue with that. I tend to not use jQuery when I do Greasemonkey simply because of that. I don't want to have to run into a problem with it. I usually just pull the DOM.
If there's another third-party library you wanted to use, no problem.
Yeah, it shouldn't. Most of the other ones, it's not a problem. jQuery is the main one.
One thing to think about is that the page you're using might already have jQuery on it, and you can just use that.
Yeah, you could reach underneath and grab it, so you could do it that way as well. But I tend to shy away from it just because of that issue.
So how do you create the scripts? Like, are they separate files? Is it like a separate JavaScript file that you're attaching, or is it something where you're editing it in the browser in Greasemonkey?
So yeah, you can. So they're separate files.
Okay.
The way I like to do it within Greasemonkey itself now, it used to not have a clean way to do it within the browser. So now there's a link when you go up to manage the scripts, and you click on one of the scripts and click the preferences, a button at the bottom that will launch an external browser or external editor for you. You can use whatever editor that you like. I didn't used to have that about a year or so ago. The way you can go in to do it, the scripts are actually saved in the profile directory underneath Firefox. So you can go in and symlink that directory out. So if you want to keep your scripts in version control, you can pull that directory out and then keep it under version control that way. The TamperMonkey script, or TamperMonkey, which I had to use on the vendor HQ. The vendor HQ does not support Firefox, primarily I assume because they rely upon tablets for the most part, so they don't support Firefox. So they use they only use Chrome, and so Chrome I had to use TamperMonkey. So this was the first time I'd ever used TamperMonkey. I heard quite a bit about it. I didn't really like it. So if you've ever had to do development on a remote dev box that's really laggy, that's kind of the experience because you have to use their editor. So apparently there's some security issues with Chrome that they had to store the scripts internally. So you can't actually get to the scripts. You can't use your own editor. You have to use their editor, and it kind of sucks. So that's the main reason I didn't like TamperMonkey. But all the other ones where the scripts are stored separately is just text files, and you can read about them as well.
I have a thing.
Just a neat other thing that's kind of related to Greasemonkey is there's something called Stylish, which is a Greasemonkey for CSS. So you can have your own style sheets. I've used that at work. Same idea, just CSS.
So a lot of times I'll just go into the console on a page and just kind of like make changes, and well, like he was saying, like in Chrome development tools or in Firebug or whatever, you can go in and make CSS changes and add JavaScript or whatever on that current page that you're on. Is there a way with Greasemonkey to like make those changes and then tell it to persist and then it'll like save those? Or are there any like projects or anything that anybody's done like that?
I don't know. That would be pretty useful. So that's one of the main reasons that I'll fiddle with Greasemonkey a lot of times is because the changes are persistent.
Yeah.
So if you find something Firebug that you like, it would be really handy to have something that would do a snapshot and then push it out so you could just create a wrapper like I showed that way. So I'm not aware of something. If you find that, let me know.
That would be cool.
It would be useful. But yeah, you can write these quite large. The largest ones that I dealt with were about 30, 35K, so you can write a very large sort of floating application that does a number of other things. So keep it in mind next time you have to do the impossible. So thanks.